My name is Major Claire Hartley. I am 37 years old. I have been a military trauma surgeon for 12 years. And on a Tuesday morning in February, a patient was brought to my ward whose injuries did not match the report I was given. Not slightly. Not in ways that could be attributed to documentation error. Completely. The report said blast injuries from an IED incident during a routine patrol, consistent with fragmentation wounds to the lower extremities and minor head trauma. What I found when I examined the patient was different. The wounds to his legs were not fragmentation wounds. They were contact wounds, close range, the kind produced by a weapon fired at less than 2 feet. Someone had shot this man at close range and then written a report that said something else entirely. I closed his chart. I looked at the man standing guard outside the room. He had introduced himself as Sergeant Cole from the patient's unit, sent to provide security while the patient recovered. I had been in military medicine for 12 years. I knew every unit designation currently operating in our theater. The unit on his sleeve did not exist. I picked up the chart. I walked to the nurse's station, and I started asking the right questions. The names and details in this story have been changed. Some military procedures have been simplified for storytelling purposes, but the truth at the center of it, that is real. Let me tell you about the patient first. He was logged in as Sergeant First Class Daniel Morris, 34 years old. He had been brought in at 0300 on Tuesday, unconscious, significant blood loss. The medics who brought him in had handed over a 1-page incident report and left within 4 minutes of arrival. 4 minutes. In 12 years of military medicine, I had never seen a medical handover team leave in 4 minutes. They are supposed to stay for the full handover, to answer questions, to provide context the written report cannot capture. These men left in 4 minutes. I had been asleep when he arrived. My registrar had taken the initial handover. She had logged everything correctly based on the report she was given. She had no reason to question it. I came on shift at 700. I reviewed his chart before I examined him. The report was clean, specific, detailed in the way that well-prepared incident reports are detailed. Then I examined him, and the report was wrong. Let me tell you what I know about wounds. 12 years of trauma surgery in military environments teaches you to read injuries the way a detective reads a scene. The pattern of damage, the entry and exit, the angle of impact, the blast radius or its absence. These things tell you what happened before any report reaches your desk. Fragmentation wounds from an IED have a specific pattern, scattered, multiple entry points, irregular edges, distributed across exposed surfaces based on the direction of the blast. This man's wounds were different. 2 entry wounds, left thigh, right calf, both circular, both with the specific scorching at the entry point that indicates close-range discharge. He had been shot twice, from close range, by someone standing within 2 feet of him. There was no fragmentation, no blast pattern, no secondary injuries consistent with an explosion. He had not been near an IED. Someone had shot him, and then someone had written a report that said otherwise. I stood at his bedside for a moment. He was sedated, stable. His face was turned slightly toward the window. He was someone's son, someone's colleague, someone who had been shot at close range and then handed over to a hospital with a false incident report and a guard outside his door who did not belong to a real unit. I walked out. I did not go to my office. I went to the supply room at the end of the corridor. I closed the door. I called Colonel Patricia Morrison. Morrison answered on the second ring. I told her in 4 sentences. Patient admitted 0300. Incident report says IED fragmentation. Wounds are close-range gunshot. Guard outside is wearing a unit designation that does not exist. Morrison was quiet for 5 seconds. Then she said, "Do not change anything in that chart. Do not alter his treatment in any way that would indicate you have noticed anything. Do not speak to the guard." I said, "Understood." She said, "What is the patient's log name?" I said, "Sergeant First Class Daniel Morris." She said, "Is he conscious?" I said, "Not yet." He was sedated on arrival. I expect him to regain consciousness within 4 to 6 hours based on current observations. Morrison said, "I need 2 things from you. First, a full medical documentation of his actual injuries, your clinical assessment, your professional opinion on the cause of each wound, written and signed by you." I said, "I can have that within the hour." She said, "Second, when he regains consciousness, I need you to be the first person he speaks to. Before the guard. Before anyone from his unit. Before anyone." I said, "I can arrange that." She said, "Claire," the man outside his room, "do not let him know you have noticed anything wrong. Be exactly as you would be with any security detail." I said, "I have been in military medicine for 12 years. I know how to be normal." She said, "I know you do. That is why I answered on the second ring." The object at the center of everything was the chart, not the falsified incident report, my chart. The one I wrote in the hour after Morrison's call. 12 pages. My clinical assessment of every wound. Photographs taken during examination. My professional opinion on the mechanism of injury for each one. Referenced against standard wound classification protocols. Signed and dated at 08:23 Tuesday morning. 12 pages that contradicted the one-page incident report completely. I placed my chart in the medical record system under a patient privacy flag, accessible only to me and to anyone I designated. Then I went back to the ward. I checked on 2 other patients. I stopped at the nurse's station. I asked my registrar to let me know the moment Sergeant Morris showed signs of regaining consciousness. She said, "Of course. Anything specific I should know?" I said, "Just flag me first, before anyone else." She nodded. I walked past the guard on my way back to my office. He nodded at me. I nodded back. 2 colleagues. Normal Tuesday morning. That was all. I want to pause here, because waiting for a patient to regain consciousness, while the person outside his room does not know you know what you know, is one of the more specific kinds of tension I have experienced in 12 years of this work. If you have ever had to be completely normal while knowing something that changes everything, drop a comment below and subscribe right now. Because what Daniel Morris said when he woke up and what Morrison's team found in the next 48 hours is the part that changed everything. He regained consciousness at 13:47. My registrar flagged me immediately. I was at his bedside within 90 seconds. The guard was still outside. I had asked my registrar to manage the corridor quietly. She had done it without asking why. 12 years builds a certain kind of trust. Morris looked at me. His eyes were clear despite the sedation wearing off, alert in the specific way of someone trained to orient quickly in unfamiliar environments. He said, "Who are you?" I said, "Major Claire Hartley. I am your surgeon. You are at a military medical facility. You are safe." He said, "Who else knows I am here?" I said, "The medical team, and a man outside your door who says he is from your unit." His jaw tightened. He said, "What unit does he claim?" I told him the designation. He said, "That unit does not exist." I said, "I know." He looked at me. I said, "I also know your injuries are not consistent with the incident report that came with you." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You noticed." I said, "It is my job to notice." He said, "How long do I have before he comes in?" I said, "As long as you need. Tell me what happened." He told me. I am going to give you the shape of what he told me, not every detail. Some of it is part of an active investigation. Some of it belongs to people whose names I cannot use. But the shape is this. Daniel Morris was not a sergeant first class. He was a warrant officer working in a classified capacity connected to financial oversight of contracting operations. His work had taken him into territory that certain people had decided was inconvenient. 3 weeks before he arrived in my ward, he had documented evidence of significant financial irregularities in a series of procurement contracts, funds that had been allocated to operational purposes and had not been used for operational purposes. He had been in the process of reporting this evidence through secure channels. On Monday night, he had been intercepted, not by an enemy, by people connected to the contracts. He had been shot twice and left in a location where he would be found by people who were supposed to transport him to a location where he would not be found again. The wrong people had found him first. The medics who brought him in were not part of the interception. They were genuine. They had responded to a location call and brought him to the nearest military medical facility. The incident report and the guard had arrived separately. The guard's job was to make sure Morris did not speak to anyone before certain arrangements could be made. He had not counted on a surgeon who read wounds. I called Morrison from the supply room again at 1412. I told her what Morris had told me in 6 minutes. She said, "Is he stable enough to be moved?" I said, "Not for at least 48 hours. He lost significant blood volume and the wounds require monitoring." She said, "Then we secure the facility." "I am sending people now." She said, "The guard outside the room." I said, "Yes." She said, "When my people arrive, they will manage that situation. You do not need to be involved in that part." I said, "Understood." She said, "Claire, his evidence. Did he tell you where it is?" I said, "He told me. I have written it down, encrypted note, on my personal device only." She said, "Do not transmit it on any base system." I said, "I know better than that." She said, "Yes, you do." Morrison's people arrived at 1638, 4 of them. 2 in medical staff clothing, 2 in plain clothes. The guard outside Morris's room was approached at 1641. I was in my office reviewing another patient's scans when it happened. I did not see it directly. What I know is that at 1643, the corridor outside Morris's room was under different management. At 1651, Morrison called me. She said, "It is done. The guard is in custody. Morris is secure. My medical team will take over his care from this point. You will need to brief them fully." I said, "My chart is in the system under a privacy flag. I will transfer access now." She said, 12 pages. I said, 12 pages. She said, "That chart is the foundation of the evidentiary case. Your clinical assessment of his wounds against the incident report. It establishes that someone attempted to falsify the circumstances of his injuries." She said, "Claire, without that chart, we have a complicated story. With it, we have a documented medical contradiction signed by a senior military surgeon at 0823 on Tuesday morning." I said, "I wrote it as soon as I understood what I was looking at." She said, "That is what makes it solid. The investigation ran for 7 months. I was not involved in most of it. I provided my chart. I gave a formal statement. I testified once. Morris recovered fully. His evidence, the documentation of the financial irregularities, was recovered from the secure location he had identified. It was intact. The investigation confirmed what he had found and significantly more. 3 contracting officers were arrested, 2 civilian contractors. 1 senior officer whose role in the financial irregularities had been the most carefully concealed and the most significant. Total funds misappropriated, $8.3 million over 3 years. The senior officer is serving 11 years. The 3 contracting officers received sentences between 4 and 7 years. The 2 civilian contractors pleaded guilty. Both are serving 3 years. The guard outside Morris's room, the man with the non-existent unit designation. He was a former soldier working as a private contractor for one of the arrested civilian companies. He is serving 5 years. The incident report, the 1-page document that arrived with Morris at 0300, the one that said IED fragmentation. It was traced to a document production facility connected to one of the arrested contracting officers. Professionally produced, correctly formatted, indistinguishable from a genuine military incident report, unless you knew what you were looking for, or unless you examined the patient it described, and found that his wounds told a completely different story. Morris sent me a letter 8 months after his discharge from my ward. A physical letter, not an email. He said he had been told I was the one who noticed, that I had written the chart within the hour, that I had called the right person before he was conscious enough to ask for help himself. He said, "You read the wounds before you read the report? I owe you more than I can say in a letter." I read that sentence twice. Then I put the letter in my desk drawer, next to my copy of the chart, 12 pages, my clinical assessment, my professional opinion, signed at 08:23 on a Tuesday morning, 2 documents in a drawer. One of them saved a man's life before he could ask to be saved. The other one made sure the people who tried to erase him could not. Here is what contact wounds and a false incident report taught me. Read the patient before you read the report. The report tells you what someone wanted you to know. The patient tells you what actually happened. In 12 years of military medicine, I have learned to trust the body before the paperwork. The body does not lie. The paperwork sometimes does. Read what is in front of you, not what you were told to find. Write it down. Sign it, date it, and call Morrison. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She noticed. She documented. She made the call. And she did not stop until it was done.